Ultimately, a lot of athletes struggle with sleep and they also don't place enough importance on sleep. So if we can try and maximize it, then generally we can maximize recovery and ultimately maximize your health and performance. So in terms of the team, from left to right, we have Dr. Alan McCubbin, who is a fellow of Sports Dietitians Australia and a researcher and a lecturer down at Monash University in Melbourne. Megan Foley, who is a registered dietitian and is based in America. Myself, Scott Tyndall, who's a co-founder of Fuelin. I'm based in Sydney. And then we have Elizabeth Impen, who I hope joins later to jump into this. And she is a registered nutritionist based in San Diego, and we make up the nutrition team of Fuelin. So we're going to cover sleep hygiene, what that means. A lot of athletes don't actually know what that means. Some nutrition strategies around maximizing your health, sleep duration considerations, supplements to consider, and then good old tracking. So sleep and nutrition strategies. Okay. So when we talk about habits and practices that are conducive to sleeping well on a regular basis, that is what we're talking about with regards to sleep hygiene. Okay. Now, sleep hygiene sounds like a very clinical sort of term, and I think a lot of people therefore shy away from it, and maybe there could be a better term for it. But effectively, these are the simple things that you can do to try and improve your sleep. And I can think of an instance just recently where I was chatting to, he's quite a well-known influencer in Australia, and he's really taken off and he's doing, he portrays this level of fitness and health, but he actually said to me he's really struggling with his sleep. And I said, what's going on? He goes, oh, I take magnesium, I'm doing all that. And I said, mate, what time do you put your phone down in the evening? Oh, no, actually before that, I said, what time do you wake up? And he said, oh, 4:30. And I said, oh, that makes it tough because you've got to like reverse engineer it and make sure you're in bed for probably at least 9 hours. And he said, no, I get into bed at 8. He said, yeah, but I just can't sleep during the night. And I said, what time do you put your phone down? And he said, 8 o'clock. And he said, because up until then, he's doing reels and images and all this sort of stuff. But effectively, that phone and that blue light and that stimulus, which is not necessarily noxious stimulus, but it's still stimulus on the brain, it ultimately is what is keeping him ticking over. So getting into bed at 8, he's still completely wired. And that ultimately is going to have a significant impact on your sleep quality and also your sleep duration. So the first thing I would say is that a number one tip in terms of sleep hygiene is putting down any device. So whether that be an iPad or an iPhone or a mobile phone, I should say, ideally one minimum of 1 hour before actually getting into bed, but ideally 2 hours. Can I just check everyone can see my actual screen just before I continue on?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
It's all right. Sorry, everyone's just very cool. So that's the first thing in terms of sleep hygiene that you want to be doing. Screens down. Doesn't matter if it's what you consider noxious stimulus, it is still stimulus on the brain, and that is going to keep you going. So that would be number one. The second would be emails. Do not check your emails at night. The reason I say that is A, nothing good is going to come out of it. Okay. You're not going to change the world by checking your emails, but all it's going to do again is trigger stimulus in the brain and have you thinking, oh my God, I didn't do this, or someone emailed me this and that. It is an absolute dead set certain. If you do check your emails in the evening, it is going to have an impact on your sleep duration and your sleep quality. The second thing is then your environment, setting up your environment. As it says here, dark, cool, technology free. So no TVs in the room. No televisions, okay? I know a lot of people are like, what? No TVs? No TVs. If you do have a television in the room, do not have it just on standby, okay? When you turn it off, make sure it's fully turned off at the power point. So that little red light that is often shining, even that amount of light in your room can have a negative impact on your sleep quality. Same for digital clocks. If you've got an alarm clock, which is a digital clock, and that light is in the room, then that may impact your sleep quality and sleep duration. Any other device, like don't have your mobile phone charging next to your bed. I always laugh when I say there's mini series and the phone goes off and the person reaches over and picks up their phone. I'm like, why do you have your phone in the bedroom? You do not need your phone in the bedroom because you're going to be sleeping. You're not going to be talking on the phone. So put it in the kitchen as far away as possible. Blackout blinds would be the other thing, or certainly having blinds that eliminate as much light as possible. That would certainly be recommended. Um, Cooler is better. So ideally, somewhere around that 68 Fahrenheit or around 18 degrees Celsius is the optimal temperature. If you can have a cooler temperature, then that is best. There are certain devices you can use, like chili pads and whatnot, aid sleep. They're very expensive. I don't think you need that. Sometimes just having, well, certainly not your heaters on during winter will make that room cool enough. In terms of sleep, I think the big thing about sleep and getting enough sleep is do not think that your time in bed is not your sleep hours. Okay, so if you're only in bed for 7 hours, there is a good chance you're probably only getting around 6 hours of sleep, whether you're tracking it or not. Okay, a good rule of thumb is take off at least 1 hour of time from time in bed to give you an average sort of how much sleep you may be getting. So therefore, you want to work backwards from your sleep. So if you're getting up at 6, go back, I would say at least 9 hours backwards from that. And that is when you want to be getting into bed if you want to try and get 8 hours sleep. The thing I would say about sleep as well is that most athletes underestimate how much sleep they require. So if we think about the average amount of sleep that an athlete or anyone is recommended, somewhere between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. An average of 8 hours is what's recommended. Now that's for the average person. That's not for an athlete who's training 8, 9, 10, 15, 20, 25 hours a week. If you think about it, if the minimum amount recommended for the average person is 7 hours, do you really think that 7 hours is going to be conducive to you being optimal? Think about it in the same way as the recommended daily intake for protein. It's 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight. That is not the recommendation for an athlete. And I would say a very similar concept would apply to athletes when it comes to sleep. Okay. And so if you work backwards from that time that you wake up consistently, and again, consistency here is a really important thing, consistent wake up time in the morning and consistent bedtime. If you can get more consistent with those two elements of your sleep hygiene strategy, then you will end up having better quality sleep and you'll have better duration of sleep. Okay, a lot of people ask what is the impact of sleep on health and performance. And I think based on the studies that we have, uh, and again, it's a lot of correlation here. It's very hard to do long-term randomized controlled studies, but certainly when we look at the impact of sleep on health and performance, we know that there is an increased risk of these non-communicable type diseases. So i.e. Cancers, mental health problems, cardiovascular disease, metabolic type syndromes. Now, why that occurs, there's lots of different theories. It has certainly impact on the body system itself. As from a physiological standpoint, we know that reduced sleep can have an impact on, say, glucose control or blood sugar control. We also know that poor sleep can have an impact on things like nutrition. So when you have poor sleep or reduced amount of sleep, quality and quantity, you tend to make poorer choices around nutrition. So that hedonistic sort of urge is then pushed on, comes through, and what you crave is sugar and salty types of foods, which ultimately probably comes down to junk food. And we've all been there where we've had a bad night's sleep and you tend to go for the burger and fries as opposed to the lovely piece of fish and salad. Sleep, as much as you think it doesn't impact performance, it will most certainly impact training and racing. You'll probably get away with it a few times, and certainly when you're younger, you'll get away with it far better than when you're older, but that performance will be impacted over time. So again, similar to nutrition, probably 1 or 2 times, not going to have a massive impact, but if you keep getting that sleep debt and you're not getting enough recovery, which is where your primary form of recovery is going to come during sleep, then it is going to have an impact on training and racing. And that plays into a lot of these studies which have looked at injury surveillance over time and what they've found, again, correlation, but those athletes who have reduced amounts of sleep tend to have a higher risk of injury and also upper respiratory tract infections. Feel free to ask any questions as well if you've got anything like this. Okay, so in terms of nutritional interventions that you can apply to improve your sleep, carbs at night. A lot of people will shy away from carbs at night because you think carbs are obviously going to make you fat, which we know is not true. And anyone on the Fuelin program hopefully knows that by now. But it's total calories that are ultimately going to have an impact. So if you're in a caloric surplus, of course, carbs will contribute to an increase in body fat and total weight. However, if you're in an isocaloric state or certainly a caloric deficit, then that is not going to be the case. And so utilizing carbohydrates and different types of carbohydrates at certain times of the day can actually have a positive impact on sleep. And as it says here, high carb or those higher carb meals, think green if you're in Fuelin, certainly including things like rice here, chickpeas, pulses, obviously fruit comes into this, pasta and bread. These type of higher glycemic type foods has been shown to have a positive impact on sleep. The reason for that is because it is going to have a positive effect on, and combined with protein, it will have an effect. So there's certain amino acids, tryptophan, for instance. You then go down the route of the production of melatonin, which is a process which can be stimulated and can be impacted by carbohydrates. So the end product being melatonin, but carbohydrates can have a positive impact on that production of melatonin. So again, those individuals who go on a very low carb evening meal may find that sleep is not as good as if they have a higher glycemic type feed prior to bedtime. Now, the caveat to that might be not eating that higher glycemic index immediately before bed, because that sensation, if you're very full, if you've had a big curry, which might contain a lot of white rice and be very good from the high glycemic index, but if you are very full and feel very stodgy, then that can also impact sleep. So we would recommend you try and have that meal, at least 1 hour before bed, but probably somewhere like 1 to 2 hours before bed. Consuming protein in combination with the carbs is certainly going to be important. As it says there, high fat, low calorie before bed can have an impact. And I think the last thing I really want to harp on here is that low energy availability. So we do know that sleep can be negatively impacted by low energy availability. I was listening to a fantastic episode of Fueling Endurance, Dr. Alan McCubbin's podcast, and I think it's episode 57B, and it is the account of a ex-professional Great Britain runner and her account of low energy availability and RED-S. And what she talks about is some of those signs and symptoms of RED-S that she experienced. And one of those was insomnia. And a lot of people won't associate insomnia with low energy availability, but what is apparent is that sleep disturbances can occur as a result of low energy availability. Now, you may also experience other things like night sweats or getting very, very cold. And they could be lesser known sort of signs or symptoms of low energy availability that you weren't aware of that could be also impacting your sleep quality and sleep duration. So if your sleep hygiene is very good and you're not checking emails, you're not using your phone before bed, you've eaten carbs before, and you've given yourself time, but you're still constantly laying in bed and thinking about everything, and sort of everything's running through your mind, you get constant insomnia and that, it may be worth speaking to either your coach or your nutrition expert about the possibility of, are you under fueling yourself, and is that contributing to your lack of sleep? And as I said before, like I touched on this before in terms of the impact of sleep and the impact of sleep on nutrition and the impact of nutrition on sleep. So it is sort of this bi-directional relationship, which we have touched on before in some of the previous Q&As. So we know that if sleep is reduced, then it will tend to result in an increased intake of calories. It will result in poor habits, as I said, consuming all these lovely In-N-Out burgers. Burgers and fries is generally the one that I tend to go for if I have a bad night's sleep. And that will likely result in an increased likelihood of gaining weight or obesity. Okay. Now that increase in obesity isn't directly related to sleep. It's what sleep does to those habits. So as it says here, short sleep will increase the likelihood of snacking, and snacking generally will result in an overconsumption of calories unless it's very well controlled. Okay. So the total number of meals throughout the day will tend to be increased if you've got short sleep. And because you've made poor habit or poor choices around those meals or snacks, total calorie intake will tend to occur. Now, if that happens once, that is not a major issue. If it happens consistently because you're always only getting 5.5, 6 hours of sleep, trying to train and work and do everything else, then that could over time result in obviously an increase in body weight, and sorry, I'm just getting a notification on my computer. An increase in body weight and certainly an increase in risk of obesity. And so I think it is really important to think about that. Now, the other play on that is nutrition can have an impact on sleep. So it's not always just that sleep making poor choices. So good nutrition choices can obviously then impact sleep in a positive way, and much like the other way. So as I mentioned, if you are eating lots of fruits and vegetables, we know that sleep duration and sleep quality will be improved based on the research. We know that if you are eating lots of fruits and vegetables, that the ability to fall asleep is also going to be improved, and to stay asleep is going to be improved. So don't always think about how sleep is going to impact nutrition, but nutrition can obviously impact sleep. No, that's what I said. Sorry, I didn't know that. Was it coming up in the slide? So yeah, as it says here, and just to reinforce that, increased consumption of fruit and veg is going to result in better sleep quality, and it's also going to result in better sleep quantity. So that is really important for athletes to think about. But again, much like if you have one bad night's sleep, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to put on lots of weight because you've had a bad day and snacking and whatnot. Same thing for fruit and vegetable consumption. Having one day where you've eaten, 5 serves of fruit and veg isn't going to suddenly make you a super sleeper. It's going to be all about consistency. And we know that, for all the Fuelin athletes out there, it's about being consistent with your protein consumption, consistent with your carbohydrate consumption. That carbohydrate consumption is generally going to result in your consistent fruit and vegetable consumption, and obviously the variation in those types of fruit and vegetables to give you the total amount of carbohydrates that you require. We do know as well that, if you want to go down the route of talking about pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory types effects, we know that higher consumption of fruit and vegetables due to the components, those antioxidant components, that it is going to have a reduction in those pro-inflammatory markers, mainly interleukin-6 and C-reactive protein. You won't often get them tested in blood tests. You can get what's called high-sensitive CRP tested, which is a general inflammatory marker. That might be something of interest. Certainly your omega-3 index, which could be considered a marker of inflammation as well. With a higher omega-3 index, you should see a reduction in total inflammation in the body. And just to come back to that talk about sleep hygiene and really things that can have a negative effect on sleep. So as I said, bright light predominantly is going to be from mobile phones and devices of that nature. So working on your desktop computer late at night as well, you can buy those screen dimmers or put the filters over, which certainly will reduce that. If you are working late at night and you do want to try and reduce that blue light, then certainly blue light blockers, the glasses that make you look like Tron, they certainly could be something that you consider wearing. Note that you should only wear them at night. You shouldn't be blocking blue light all the time because it is actually important to the brain and stimulation of certain areas within the brain to control things like cortisol and whatnot. So bright light, obviously at night, is a noxious stimulus in that sense. It will keep you sort of hyperstimulated. Noxious stresses, obviously, arguments, reading emails. I think emails are the biggest noxious stress you can get at night. Certainly, alcohol, as pictured here. As much as we like to think that alcohol is something that is going to help us sleep, I think it's pretty clear that alcohol, even you could argue one drink may be okay, but what is one drink? It's certainly not what most people pour. And if you have a bottle of beer, you often see that it's 1.5 or 1.6 standard drinks, and same for a shot of any spirit. So, or a glass of wine, you certainly probably aren't pouring yourself 120 mils. So just be aware that your one drink is probably not a one standard drink, and therefore would probably have a negative impact on sleep. I have written a couple of articles on the impact of alcohol on athletic performance. I think if you go on Training Peaks and also triathlete.com and just search my name and alcohol, you'll probably find some pretty interesting articles where I sort of showed some, again, it's N=1, but I showed some graphs and some data, which was recorded from my Aura ring, which again, I'm not saying is solid scientific proof, because I think there are issues with the way in which it's recorded. However, it can give you some really nice insights, and I think we're going to talk about some tracking in a minute. But that is certainly something to consider if you are drinking alcohol and you want to understand better how that could play into impacting sleep duration and sleep quality. It's certainly something to consider. The other thing would be caffeine. Certainly, caffeine is going to have an impact on sleep because of the way in which the mechanism of caffeine works. So it is going to have an impact on those receptors, blocking certain receptors where adenosine attaches, and that stops that sleepy process. So the longer in or later into the day that you're consuming caffeine, the bigger effect it's going to have in terms of that latency for sleep. Remembering that the half-life for caffeine, depending on who you are and how you metabolize it, is probably going to be somewhere between 4 and 6 hours. So if you have a double espresso at, say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you most likely will still have 70 milligrams of caffeine at 9 o'clock at night in your body. And yes, there are certain people who can have an espresso late at night and fall straight asleep. I'm certainly not one of them. So maybe if there was some genetic testing, I would potentially recommend, it could be having a look at the way in which you metabolize caffeine. It's certainly based on some research I know Alan and Elizabeth talked about recently, where the amounts of caffeine that you take in pre-race and also the amounts you take in during a race could be affected by your genetic makeup. So something quite interesting there. Exercise timing as well. If you, again, I'll make sure I get this right. Certainly exercising in the afternoon can have a positive effect on sleep, but if you exercise very late at night, for some individuals, it will have a negative impact on their sleep quality and their sleep duration. So again, individual variations, but certainly play around with that. Obviously, if you exercise late at night, you're going to be having a meal late at night as well. And if that meal is sort of less than an hour before going to bed, that could have a negative impact on it. So it's sort of thinking about how all these things play together and placing the importance of sleep, and then how everything like your nutrition and your exercise then plays around that. I would certainly prioritize sleep as one of those all important factors to allow you to thrive.
Scott,
Yeah.
what does the research say regarding napping, power napping specifically? I mean, we all train a lot, multi-hours, and sometimes to get it done, we've got to use that training time in those odd hours and balance everything else. What is the recommendation or the output from some of that research regarding those power naps?
Yeah, I was listening to Andy Galpin talk about this, and again, I'm not an expert in that side of things in terms of sleep, but I think you can use sleep effectively as long as it doesn't impact your sleep, if that makes sense. So you can't bank sleep first and foremost. So, but you can try and get some back, and if you can effectively use power naps to maybe go into some restorative sleep. then it can be an effective strategy. And I know plenty of professional athletes who have mid-morning sleeps. I've certainly used to do it. Not that I was a professional athlete, but just had a job where it allowed me to sleep during the day, and that managed. What that did was offset the sleep debt that I was getting in the night due to traveling with a team and whatnot. So I think as long as it doesn't impact sleep and your ability to fall asleep and stay asleep later in the day, then I think it's a worthwhile strategy.
Thank you.
Cool. Does anyone else have any other questions on that? Okay. As this statement
I'm
says,
sorry.
oh yeah, go
I
on.
unmuted late. This is Phil Carrier. I had a quick question about aging and sleep. I'm a triathlete in my 70s, but I've been doing triathlons for 30 years. And as I've gotten older, and my doctor told me that it's most likely I'm going to get less sleep every night. Yet I read other things that say, and I just heard you say, I still need 8 to 9 hours. And I'm 75 years old. And I know now I feel good and I seem to perform okay, but I'm down to around 5 hours of solid sleep a night, 5, 6. And so I do the nap, but then the doctor told me on the other side of the coin, he said, "Oh, when you get older, napping it may not be that necessarily good because that could be the first signs of dementia." So something to worry about. Anyway, sorry.
No. Well done you for doing triathlon for 30 years and still doing it at the ripe old age, or the young age, I should say, of 75. So very
Yes,
good. What was your
thank you.
name?
Young
What
age.
was your
I'm
name?
not old.
What was your name?
Phil Carrier.
Phil. Yeah, Phil. Absolutely. A number. It's just a number, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm
You're
not
only
that
as
old
young.
looking. There's my picture. I'm not that old. I try not to be. Anyway.
Very good. Look, it is true. As you age, you tend to get less sleep. I'm not exactly sure of the mechanism behind that. I think there is a difference between males and females as well with regards to that. And I think menopause has a fairly significant impact on women's sleep patterns as well. Um, I think if you can maximize your sleep, I can't see any reason to not try and get as much sleep. As I said, within 7 to 9 hours, we know that a reduced amount of sleep throughout our lifetime also poses an increased risk of things like neurodegenerative diseases, which I didn't mention before. So the increased risk of dementia is associated with reduced sleep volume. So, you know, you having 5 hours sleep a night, I would say try and increase that certainly if you can. If using naps, and they are purposeful naps, like it's not like you're falling asleep without trying. I wouldn't say that's a sign of dementia. I'd say that's you being very purposeful and trying to actually maximize your recovery. So I think, again, put it in context. Yes, I understand what your doctor's saying, that it could be a sign if you're just falling asleep randomly. But I think in your case, if you're training for an Ironman or a half Ironman or whatever you're doing, then I'd say using those strategies would be
Yeah, thank
very
you. I told my
sensible.
doctor the same thing. I've been training for Ironmans for a lot of years, and I just, I do take my naps. You need your naps, especially if you're still working.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. So yeah,
Thank you. Good answer. I'm gonna
yeah, cool. I'm glad
pass
that
it on to
helped.
my doctor. So
um, look, and as I touched on this, like it was one of the biggest things in terms of like sleep and what I saw. Reducing alcohol to zero certainly had the biggest impact on resting heart rate and HRV and duration of sleep. And they're the three metrics. If you are tracking, they're probably the three things that I would recommend that you look at. I could not care about a sleep score. A sleep score, just for everyone to know, whatever device you're wearing, is a made up number. Um, I think it has very little scientific basis. I think there are a number of contributors to those sleep scores. And yes, it's nice to have a score, and if you're doing really well, but I would look at sort of the data that we know is important related to health and performance. And that would, for me, be your resting heart rate, your HRV, and sleep duration. Even the stages of sleep that a lot of these devices are talking about, you have to question the reliability of it, and is it at gold standard sort of clinical grade sleep detection? And at this point in time, I don't think we can say that. Well, supplements. Everyone loves supplements, so I guess we have to talk about it. L-theanine, It is an amino acid and has been shown to reduce some jitters. It certainly can be used in conjunction with caffeine as well to reduce the jitters of caffeine. It's probably not something that everyone's going to go and take, and you would have to be very purposeful with the consumption of L-theanine. But you could try it, especially at night, if you are having issues with sleeping. L-theanine is also found in tea. However, some teas will have caffeine in it, so you just have to balance that out as well. Magnesium seems to be the supplement that everyone is talking about at the moment with regards to sleep. Obviously, our good friends at Pillar Performance have a very good product by the name of triple magnesium. What it does contain is a certain type of magnesium called magnesium bisglycinate. And magnesium bisglycinate is one of the magnesium forms that has been shown in research to help assist with sleep duration and sleep quality. The absorption of magnesium bisglycinate is very good. I think it's up in sort of the 85, 90% sort of bioavailability standpoint, whereas a lot of the other magnesiums that you will purchase in a lot of products, so magnesium oxide, for instance, has a 5% availability. So therefore, if you took in 100 milligrams of magnesium oxide, you will get about 5 milligrams of it. If you take in 100 milligrams of magnesium bisglycinate, you'll probably get around 85, 90 milligrams. And that's a really important point, because if you then go, okay, well, magnesium oxide is going to be very cheap. And that's why when you buy a magnesium supplement from a poor, maybe a brand that's not as reputable, or from a source that's not as reputable, that magnesium supplement will be very cheap. You look at the ingredients, you go, oh, magnesium oxide. Okay, it's got a very low bioavailability, therefore I'm just going to take more of it. The problem with taking more magnesium is that it will probably give you diarrhea. So if you don't want to be up all night, going to the toilet, which is obviously going to have a very negative impact on sleep, you certainly want to think about the type of magnesium that you're consuming. And magnesium bisglycinate would be one of those. Dosages, I don't think it's entirely clear, but certainly up around that 200 to 400 milligrams as a dosage in the evening, probably 30 to 60 minutes before going to sleep, would be a possible supplement that you could use. I will caution this that, and again, love Pillar and all that, but work on the things that you can also do without just taking the magic pill. So sleep hygiene, thinking about all those elements, your time in front of screens and whatnot, the temperature of your room. I didn't mention clean cotton sheets as well. Get the highest quality clean cotton sheets. Make sure they're washed at least once a week as well. Do not have polyester sheets because they won't breathe very well. But set up your room so it's lovely and it's enticing for sleep. And obviously do your breath work and mindfulness and all that. And if on top of that you find that taking something like magnesium could be beneficial, then certainly go down that route. Choose reputable brands is what I would say. And certainly something like the Pillar Magnesium, it is informed sport, so it is tested for banned substances as well, which I think for any athlete out there is certainly something that you should be thinking about. Tart cherry juice, very useful, can be really useful again for sleep quality. And there are some studies showing the benefits of tart cherry juice. It's also a very powerful antioxidant. So it's been shown to improve delayed onset muscle soreness when consumed after exercise. I will caution though, with anything for every good, there's sometimes a sort of payback. So if you are taking a lot of tart cherry juice and you're taking high concentrations of it, it could have a negative impact on the adaptation to that exercise. So, just be aware of that you don't always want to be trying to blunt, inflammation. Inflammation isn't always bad. Small amounts of inflammation can actually result in adaptation. Ultimately, exercise creates inflammation, and that results in adaptation over time. So think about that.
Scott, on that note, what would be an appropriate amount?
Off the top of my head, it depends on, I'm trying to think. There's a product called Cherry Active, which I don't think you can get in America for some reason. It's really weird, but it's a concentrated how do you say it? Montecero or something type of cherry. You certainly can buy it in. You can buy that type of cherry juice in America. It's just not this brand of Cherry Active. I can't remember what the actual milligrams is off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I can find out and have a look at those
Yeah, well,
studies, and we can
I
share those
take,
studies.
and I just take an ounce or two before bed, so I assume that's not a massive amount. It's a
No,
concentration.
it should be fine, honestly.
Okay,
It's like vitamin C, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
that's something you can try. A kiwi fruit, there's some pretty interesting studies. There was a cool study where they had participants, I think they were Japanese. So you obviously got to think about, like, okay, is the population study you? Who were they? Were they triathletes? No, they weren't, blah, blah, blah. But they had them eating either two kiwi fruit or not eating kiwi fruit, and looking at did they improve sleep. And kiwi fruit has like one of the highest concentrations of tryptophan in it. And those individuals who were eating two kiwi fruits at night, slept better than those who weren't. So, is it the tryptophan? There's vitamin C in there. Is eating, that quantity of vitamin C, is that going to be too much vitamin C from an antioxidant perspective? No, it's not. It's in whole food form. I think it's fine.
Okay.
So look, if that tart cherry juice improves your sleep and you're not drinking gallons of it, I'm sure it would be absolutely fine.
Yep, thanks.
Cool. As mentioned, so that's your pillar, triple magnesium. Whatever you want to call it, glycinate dihydrate or bisglycinate. As it says there is some improvement, and there is some research linking it to improvement in sleep cycles or sleep performance. You'll see plenty of ads around Whoop and, all these athletes take it, improving their Whoop scores. So just check that it works for you. That's the most important thing. It does have, as I said, some other forms of magnesium in it that maybe don't relate directly to sleep, but they could have impact on things like muscle recovery, and then certainly improving absorption. So look, it's a good product. I think anecdotally, I haven't seen any direct research on this product, but anecdotally, I know both professional and age group athletes that I've worked with who do take it do tend to report an improvement in sleep, whether it's placebo or not sure, but there certainly seems to be a good correlation between the consumption of that and improved sleep. So maybe it's a little bit of everything. You're a bit more cognizant of your sleep hygiene. You're taking this, you're eating some more carbs at night, and you're just doing everything a little bit better. And this is like the cherry on top. Excuse the pun. Tracking. I think I've touched on tracking as well. So I guess the thing with tracking is, if you're tracking and you're not actually doing anything with the data, then I think, what's the point? And honestly, I was actually going to do a poll on Instagram and just see whether anyone actually pays any attention to the recommendation for how long to rest after you've completed your sessions. Because I know with things like Garmin and Whoop and Aura, you'll do a hour and a half or maybe a 2-hour bike session or something, and it'll tell you have to have 48 hours rest. And now I'm pretty sure no one actually says, oh, you know what, my device is telling me 48 hours, so therefore I'm going to have that rest. And that also applies to things like, what data are you specifically getting from the sleep? And so, I mean, I can't see a show of hands, but how many people just sing out? Like, how many people wear a Whoop or an Aura and track their sleep? Like, is it in the high percentages? Does anyone wear Aura or Whoop?
I was
Feel free to
wearing an
speak.
Aura ring for a long time. It was like it's just a toy. And then my finger started bothering me, and I haven't worn it for several months, and it doesn't bother me that I don't know exactly how much deep sleep I got.
Yeah. Did you actually ever look at what was being presented to you and think, how can I actually intervene on this? And what can I do to make my data better?
No.
And honestly, that's the
wore
very
a
typical
Garmin
response I hear.
I wore a Garmin at sleep, tried it for about 6 months, and I got to be a disbeliever like you that it was accurate. So out of curiosity, I had a notepad next to the bed, and being in my 70s, I have to run to the little boys' room quite often during the night. I would mark down when I did, and there was a very a distant match to what was showing up on the watch. You know, I'm obviously wide awake to walk to the bathroom, and it didn't show that. You know, it
Yeah.
showed me sleeping still. So I don't think it's very accurate.
Yeah, and look, the devices, look, I think, unfortunately, I think at this point in time, when you look at the research around the quality of the sleep tracking, I think there is a disparity in sort of, the quality of what's coming out now. Companies like Aura and Whoop will make claims around the accuracy based on sleep studies, and I think that's fine. Again, I'm not 100% sure on that. Certainly compared to Garmin, and I love my Garmin watch for everyday exercise and activity, but I think in terms of sleep, my biggest problem with a Garmin watch is actually it's quite chunky, and I think the chunkiness on the watch actually disturbs my sleep pattern. So I would certainly, and I've done this consistently, I've advised athletes to actually take off their watch at night. And more often than not, they actually report better sleep just as a result of that. So I think that is a consideration. Certainly, if you've got a partner in your bed as well, they hate the Garmin watch because it's so chunky and cold and whatnot. So that could be something just to play into from a very practical perspective. That's why I moved to Aura, to be honest, because it's just a ring. And I do wear it. Because it's a ring, it doesn't necessarily impact, and it sort of just sits on your finger. So I think in terms of the data, as I really said, I look at HRV, I look at sleep duration, and I look at resting heart rate. And they're the three elements or three pieces of data that I tend to recommend to athletes to look at, and then look at ways in which, what did you do the day before that could be negatively impacting that, and play on that. But again, the point being, if you're not going to do anything with that data, then don't bother wearing it. I think in terms of really simple data that you can use, and this is a screenshot from Fuelin, is like well-being questions. And again, we've talked about this quite a lot, but when you look at the data and you look at the research comparing, say, wearables to just simple questions, and that subjective objectiveness in terms of seeing if an athlete is ready to perform, these questions come out either just as good or on top. So I would certainly encourage you, if you are using Fuelin, to do these questions every day and reflect on it. How's your mood? How's your motivation to train? How was your sleep quality? How was your muscle recovery? Were you hungry? And are you sick? And if these are all sitting, it doesn't matter if you're always a 2, or always a 3, or 4, or 5. As long as they're either sitting steady or improving consistently, that's what you want to look at. And that's probably as much detail. If you want to keep it at the bare minimum, keep it at that. Obviously, if they're trending in the wrong direction over days and over weeks, then you've got a problem, and you certainly need to reach out to one of the team. But those simple, 5 or 6 questions, including the sick today, they're very, very good questions to actually see how you are, if you are ready for the day ahead.
And I think the thing that triggers as you're looking at those scores, it makes you think, how is my mood today? And you reflect back on potentially what you did yesterday. Did you get enough sleep? Did you make smart nutritional choices? Are you paying attention day over day in order to actually make a difference? And the thing with wearables, one of the big problems that they saw is whether or not you actually get good sleep, psychologically, they have multiple studies that show if they tell the athletes your sleep quality was poor, they perform worse on the testing afterwards, whether or not they actually had poor quality sleep. And on the reverse, athletes that don't look at the data and say, I had an excellent night of sleep, they will perform better. So your perception of your sleep really does matter. And when you're so tied to data that isn't necessarily accurate, then you get caught up in this. And that's why, if at the very least, it could throw off your game, but at the very worst, it's going to have a psychological impact that's going to negatively impede performance, and then sleep the next day. And as all type A triathletes tend to do, become obsessive with it. And, oh, my sleep was bad last night, it's going to be a bad day, and so on and so on.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And if there was a way, if I could turn off the sleep scores, I would. Literally, I would turn them off and just look at the raw data. But unfortunately, at this point in time, I don't think you can do that. So Okay, so key takeaways. Look, it is a symbiotic relationship. Nutrition will impact sleep, and sleep will impact nutrition, and sleep will certainly have a very big impact on your recovery and your performance and your overall health. So I think don't underplay how important sleep is. Certainly that 7 to 9 hours. Yes, we've all heard you need, your mum saying you need 8 hours sleep, which is the midpoint. But think about it from the terms of what you as an individual require. If you're training a lot and you've got a job, then 7 hours is probably not going to be enough for you. And do implement like the ideas that we talked about, like the sleep hygiene, nutrition, supplementation. If it is something you're going to track, then think about those strategies to improve your sleep so you can get maybe a minimum of 8 hours, maybe even 9 hours. And then again, using those simple questions, does your motivation to train, does your energy suddenly get better? Is your willingness to actually train, does your incidence or susceptibility to sickness, does that start to reduce? Suddenly you see that the impact that, optimal sleep can have on your health and performance. And so it's always, think about what you're trying to do and apply the specific interventions to make a positive change. Cool. Well, I will stop my share. Hello, Elizabeth. I'm so sorry. I apologize to the group because I think I messed you up and confused the hell out of you and probably everyone else at Fuelin. So once again, I'm sorry. But anyway, I think I got through your presentation. Hopefully, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was just going to say, shows your level of expertise that you can jump in at a moment's notice and just carry the presentation. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know. I think I might have messed up a couple of things, so might have to go back over it and have a look. I know we've got about 8 minutes. You can answer these. I'll read them out and you can just answer them. What are the best recommended timings for exercise during the day?
Well, I'm sure your coaches would say whenever it is that you can get it done, but we see through kind of circadian rhythm research and where it's related to nutrition, mornings are best. But if you're an athlete that is what they call it, like a night owl, and you train well at night and you do your best work at night, then that is your ideal time. But research amongst a greater group of athletes show that the morning is the best time. And we race in the morning. And one of the important factors in performance is training when you're going to be racing. So in the long run, the morning is probably best if it fits your life schedule.
Cool. Yeah, I think that individual variation, that's what I sort of said. So I'm glad you agree. That's good. Tart cherry juice. Yep. Good for inflammation such as gout. Certainly. I think things we touched on is probably just too much of anything isn't always a good thing. So thank you. Elizabeth put in that 30 mils of tart cherry juice concentrate is the equivalent of 240 mils of tart cherry juice. Do you know how much of the active components would be in that, Elizabeth?
Mean like the antioxidant component or?
Yeah, so they have, I'm trying to think what the specific component of the tart cherry juice is off the top of my head. And anthocyanins, I think they're called. Anthocyanins.
Yes.
I can never say that word. But do we know what the milligrams is of that, in that amount? Because I think that's what that active ingredient in particular within the tart cherry juice, those anthocyanins or however you pronounce it, that's what's been shown to have a positive impact on muscle damage, delayed onset muscle soreness. Also, I think has an impact on, as we said, those inflammatory markers throughout the body. And whatnot. So I think it also has a positive impact on blood pressure as well. So yes, they're the reasons for it. You just don't want to be taking too much of it, especially after heavy weights training too often, because it could have a negative impact, a bit like ice baths. So time and a place, people.
The kind that you get, like the Montmorency cherries, there are generic cheap cherry juice things. Like pay attention to what you're buying. Do not get like cherry flavored Kool-Aid. Not the same.
Yeah. We didn't mention actually fish oils as well. I'm not going to claim that fish oils Definitely will help you sleep, but I think there is some research showing that those individuals who take in more omega-3s can have a positive impact on sleep. Now, how the mechanism of that works, I'm not quite sure. Maybe something to do with the brain, but certainly that could be something, again, to consider. Again, do you know what your omega-3 index is? Get tested, get your doctor to do an omega-3 index test, or just go onto Omega Quant and get the basic test, see what your level is. If it's really terrible, you struggle with sleep, supplement, eat more fish, oily fish, get it tested again, 8 weeks. Does your level go up? Does your sleep improve? Maybe it's a little bit of everything. So think again about the big picture. There's no more questions. I know I hogged
Hey,
this
Scott?
one. Yeah.
I did have one question. One of the recommendations was potentially protein prior to bed.
Yep.
I usually take whey protein isolate throughout the day. Well, not throughout the day, but earlier in the day. I've always heard you should consider casein at night because it's a slower release. Does that matter from a sleep perspective?
Well, I mean, whey protein in isolate is going to stimulate an insulin response, which could actually, maybe help with sleep as well. I think in terms of the digestion of the protein, it's just going to be slower. And if you look at that recent study by Tromlin, where they did the 100 grams of protein, it's probably going to be digesting for at least 12 hours or longer. Maybe a whey protein wouldn't take as long to digest, and maybe that has a positive impact on sleep. I guess, again, if you're taking that casein or milk protein concentrate, which is predominantly going to be casein, if you take it too close to bed, then that could result in you just feeling very full and not necessarily sleeping that well. So if you are going to take casein or milk protein concentrate, I'd certainly take it at least an hour before going to bed. And for any of you that have ever consumed casein, like everyone goes, oh yeah, you should drink casein before bed. I don't know if you've ever had casein. It is thick as hell. Like it's not necessarily the nicest thing to drink. It's like a thick sludge. Generally, I would recommend blending it with a frozen banana and eating it like a smoothie bowl rather than trying to drink it, because it's literally that thick, and it will very much fill you up. If you are hungry at night and you're like, what can I eat? A casein or a milk protein smoothie bowl, which make with milk, probably over your whatever nut juice or cow's milk you want to use. But if you're worried about calories and whatnot, you can obviously choose lower calorie or make it with milk, with water. But that will certainly fill you up and get you all the way through the evening to the morning feeling very full.
Okay, thanks.
Scott and Elizabeth, Bill Blattner here. Thank you. And I was curious if there was ever a point in time that you recommend for athletes to get a sleep study. And secondarily, is there any specific data that you would look through with a sleep study that would be beneficial to nutrition, sleep, and training? Thank you.
Do you want to answer that, eh?
Sure. I will lead off with, there are much more qualified sleep scientists that will probably want to weigh in. I think if you have a problem with like a chronic sleep problem, you will know, and you will know to get it tested. That's just from the research that I did. If you are, if you do not have deep dreaming sleep, if you are sleepwalking, sleep talking, if you're doing any of the behaviors that they see that are problematic, those are chronic sleep issues, well worth looking into a sleep study. Also, if you have sleep apnea, so if your partner is telling you that you're either snoring, having potential breathing issues, those are all possibly serious considerations and an important, something important to take to either your primary care doctor or a sleep specialist. If the study showed, like, if depression and mental health is suffering, if work performance, poor concentration, but these are all things they'll after, like much after the nutritional interventions, training interventions. You could be overtraining, you could be under fueling, there could be life stress. We know, if you haven't done at least 2 months, 8 weeks of meditation, I wouldn't necessarily jump to, I have chronic sleep issues and possible, serotonin, melatonin disruptions in my brain. So that's a much more serious, and they're expensive, they're harder to find. I would check all the nutritional training boxes first.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think going down the route of a sleep study could be overkill for an initial starting point. I'd go through your sleep hygiene, like in the PDF, the guide that we send out to athletes when they first join. The last page of that is actually like a checklist to go through from a sleep hygiene perspective. And often it's just simple measures like that that can have a huge impact. So, sleep hygiene, get your nutrition right, get your training right, maybe manipulate that. Think about meal timing before bed, so on. Then I think that will generally have a fairly positive impact. But certainly, if you are experiencing severe sleep difficulties, then speak to your primary care physician and then explore that route. Look, if you're interested in it and you just want to know, are you a good sleeper or whatnot, then sure as hell, go for it. Some people would love being guinea pigs. So just remember as well that you're not going to be in your normal environment, and that can have a negative impact on your sleep when you're getting studied. I have heard that before as well. Very good. Okay. Look, if you want to fill in the questionnaire at the end of this when we shut it off, please do. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Once again, sorry that I'm not Elizabeth and I was presenting. I'm sure you're all very disappointed because you probably wanted to listen to Elizabeth. But there you go. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you all soon. See you later. Bye.
Thank you.